Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are hopefully going to finish off the seats for the Alfarrari. Alright guys, welcome back, and those of you who were watching last week will have seen that I spent a lot of time building the seat base covers for the seats for the Alfarrari. If you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and please think about subscribing. It does help out the channel. So last week I learnt a lot of things as I went. It was the first time doing this sort of this level of trimming, and I'm really enjoying the process. It might not make the greatest videos, as I can see by how many people watched it compared to my normal, but I really think there's a lot to be gained from trying every part of the build, and this is just another part of it. So this week I have the backs of the seats. Now these are a little bit more complicated than the base, which is why I left these until later, because it's going to require some sort of hand stitching and stuff in the bottom to sort of be able to get the cover over and sew it up. But the only way to go is to get stuck in. So let's go and start cutting out some patterns and see if we can start learning from some of the things I did wrong last week. So you can see here I'm marking out and cutting out my patterns the same way as I did last week. Now I'm using the same foam as I used on the base of the seats, but this time I'm just cutting out a slightly bigger piece than what I need for each part of the pattern. Alright, so you've seen I've gone through now and I've cut out the patterns for the first upper part of the seat. And you may notice I'm doing something a bit different this time than I did last week. Now, I had a chat to Manny from CCU Auto Trim, who's helped me out with a bunch of bits and pieces. And one of his suggestions that I'd done previously is that I was gluing the foam on the back. The issue with gluing the foam on the back of the leather is that when you start bending it around the place, it's being pulled in different directions by the foam, whereas if I sew it on and keep it loose on the back, it can sort of float on the top, and it'll actually give me a nice smoother finish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually sew the bits of foam on. I cut slightly larger, and basically follow a similar process to what I did on the base, but without the glue. So let's see how that goes. So I marked my seam allowance at 10mm, and I'm sewing here just outside that at about 9mm, just so that when I come back and finally sew the pieces together on that 10mm line, that these stitches will be hidden and won't be showing through in the seam. Alright, I went through and sewed on the foam on all of these pieces, and then went around the back and trimmed off all the excess around the edges, so that any of the ones that I am going to do the French seams on and fold over, it's already done, and it just neatens it up. It'll make the seams on the back nice and neat and tidy, so they look really good. And to give you an example, here is one of the pieces, leftover pieces I stuck on last week, and this, you can sort of see how loose this foam leather is, whereas this, there's like lots of little creases and stuff, and whenever you fold it, it basically makes the whole lot thicker just by being one piece with the foam, whereas this has a lot more give and movement in it, so I think it'll actually make a nicer piece in the end. So now I've got all these bits, I need to cut out all of my join notches and then start sewing them together. So here you can see I'm cutting out my previously marked alignment notches. This is so that when you get odd shaped sections, you can make sure you keep the pieces exactly lined up where they need to be. And now I'm going through and sewing in the French seam. All right, and there is the front of my seat. I haven't sewn the back on yet. So most of it is looking really good. The thing that is going to be questionable is working out how much I need to actually open up at the bottom to be able to get this over the top of the seat to actually fit it to the car. Because obviously it seems all good if you can sort of sew it all up and magically it's on the foam, but you've still got to physically get it on there. So this is a good start. Let's see how we go about sewing the back on and seeing if we can get it to fit on the seat. All right, I've been playing around with this cover just sitting on the front of the seat and trying to work out how I'm going to get it on and off of the seat. And the issue is that it's, particularly once I sew the back on, it's so tight, there's not going to be the stretch in it. So what I've decided I'm going to do is, on the edge of these wings, this bottom part here actually is sort of underneath the back of the seat, so it's sort of down under, you're not going to see it. I'm going to cut it back where I've stitched it and leave it open and tie it off, and I'll show you later, but I'm going to hand stitch it back on. You won't actually really notice it anyway. It'll be hidden in the seam, but it's just my way of being able to get the seat cover on and off without sort of seeing how it goes together and make my life a lot easier. So I'm going to trim that back now, make sure I sew up the end where I cut it so that it doesn't just keep unraveling. I'm going to sew it together and make sure it's all tied off up to where I cut it, and then we'll go on about sewing the back on and getting this onto the seat. All right, so now it's time to start fitting this seat cover to the seat. And if you were watching a couple of weeks ago, you will have seen that I actually put a couple of these strips in that I sewed into the back of the seat to actually help attach it to the seat. And the way I'm going to do that is with this, which is a bit of stainless steel welding rod that I grabbed out of the shed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it up and feed it through into the back here through these strips that are of this white material that I sewed in, so that basically it will pull a nice even strip across the center of the backrest to sort of suck it in, and I'll be able to attach it to the seat like that. So let's start feeding this through and making this up, and I'll show you how I fit it. So I fed the bar through the strap that I put in the back of the seat, and this is going to get pulled into this gap in the seat here through the center. And originally it was set up with some string that would wrap through here, wrap around that bar and come out. What a lot of guys have done since then is use cable ties. Cable ties are a really good, easy way of doing that. And so I'm going to feed these through from the back, wrap it around the bar, and then you can sort of cinch it in afterwards to get the sort of the right level of tension. So that's what I'm going to do now, is I'm going to start trying to feed this over. Now, because this is a very tight fit over the top, there's a few ways of feeding the cover over the seat that people have used. You can put plastic over the edges and things like that, and help sort of make it slide over the foam a bit better. I actually talked to Manny, my trimmer mate, and his suggestion is, yes, you can use the plastic and things like that, but then often you can hear the crunching of the plastic afterwards through the leather. On small scale stuff, what he recommends is actually silicone spray. Silicone spray is actually the way that he recommends is the best way to get it over. So I'm going to cover all the foam here within silicone spray and inside the cover, so then hopefully it just slides over the top nice and easy, and we can sort of get it sitting where we want it to sit. So it's quite a juggling act trying to slide the seat cover over, feed through the cable ties onto that bar, and pull it all down while not stabbing myself completely on the
spiked bar that sits across the base of the seat. Yeah, it's quite a difficult wrestling match, but the silicone spray definitely made it a lot easier getting it on and off.
And that is actually sitting not too bad. There's a few creases around the place and a few issues that I want to tidy up, but overall it's a reasonable fit. Now I want to tighten up these corners a little bit to try and pull some of these creases out in here. So I've marked with my China graph where I want to tighten that up, and also there's a bit of puckering in this spot here, so I want to just sort of stretch out this piece. So basically it means taking it off, cutting it apart, and sewing it back together again, a little bit tighter this time, and hopefully that will actually get it looking all really good. But the rest of it's all looking good, the back's good, and that's still before I've actually pulled it all down and pulled it nice and tight and actually stretched it all into place. It's not actually pulled all in yet. So yeah, let's pull it off and cut it apart and sew it up again.
So to cut it apart, I just use a razor blade by hand. It's reasonably easy to pull the sides apart and cut the stitches out. But then there's still a lot of little tufts and stuff to clean up afterwards. So following the same process again, just re-stitching it together. Now the wrestling match again, trying to get the cover over the top of that foam seat.
All right, so I have the cover on. It's looking reasonable. There's a few wrinkles here that I'll try and get out with the steamer later, but ultimately it's looking pretty good. At least I'm happy enough for my first seat. Yeah, it all seems to be hugging the seat quite nicely all the way around. Now, the last thing I need to do is where I left these split open seams. Now, because I sewed on the edge before, I've got the stitches that are running all the way along the edge. If you can sort of see here, see where the stitches are, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be able to sew through those stitches and sew either side together by hand all the way along, closing that up and sealing it all in. And as I said, that's underneath anyway, that's sort of against the lower part of the seat, so you won't see it, but it should be almost invisible anyway, fingers crossed. I have here my, my needle and thread. Let's start sewing it together and hopefully sort of tie it all up and make it nice, sealed, covered seat.
So you can see here I'm just basically stitching from one side to the other all the way down and then gradually tightening as I go. Now there are some excess ends and stuff here you can see that I need to go past and sort of trim off or burn off later and tidy it up, but overall it sort of sucks it in and gets reasonably close to what the original stitch is. And here there's the spikes that are actually on the bottom of this seat that I'm sort of pulling either side and laying over the spikes and making sure it sort of pierces through the leather all the way along, and then I sort of hammer them down with the end of the pliers, which of course is the right tool for the job.
Shorty's come to help, but this is actually looking really good. Like, there is a bit of steaming I want to do, obviously, to get rid of some of these wrinkles and stuff, but the overall look is what I was planning on. So that is one down. Time for seat number 2. All right, well, that was a bunch of wrestling around to get the seat covers on, and this is the second one. This is the first one, this is the second one. They're just sitting here against the wall, but there's still a few little creases and stuff that I need to try and steam out a bit, and overall, the silicone spray worked fantastically. That made it really easy to slide it on. There was no issues with it getting sort of stuck, so I can highly recommend that. Yeah, just trying to stretch everything down. I got stabbed in the hand several times by there were spikes along the bottom of the seat. So basically at the back, this is held in by this sort of spiked rail that you sort of clip one side in and then the other side over, and then I've hammered them down, and there's actually a trim piece that gets screwed in over the top of this. But it all went together quite nicely, and okay, they're not perfect, but for me, I am very happy with the overall effect, and yeah, once I get some steam into them and get rid of some of these wrinkles, I'm not going to get rid of all of them, I think they're going to be fantastic. But now, I think it's time to start making some headrests. All right, so at least for the headrests, I'm not changing the bolstering or anything, so using an existing seat means I can use the existing cover, or the old cover, as the pattern. So I'm going to cut this apart into its individual pieces now and work out how to make it. Now, some of the things I need to think about is this actually has some of those wire rods inside the cover already. So there's one along the back, and there's sort of this stepped one across the front. So there's actually a piece of wire that steps down so I can go around the headrest. So I need to factor that in when I'm building my pattern, but let's pull this apart now and see if I can make it its component pieces and cut out and make some headrests.
So here I make a critical mistake is I start cutting apart the pattern without marking my join lines first, which I'm going through and doing now. But you really want to make sure before you cut anything apart is you mark from panel to panel so that when you come back again, you can make sure every little section all the way along the way lines up and you remember where each bit goes. So here I've made up some new metal bars to match the old ones, but this time I'm using some stainless steel so they shouldn't rust and become ugly like the old ones did.
All right, that's not too bad. I'm going to have to sew up the bottom corners like I did with the bottom of the seats, and it actually calls for a couple of hog rings. That's what these wires are in here for. They will be in there to just tie the back and the front together, and that will lock it all in, and it should be all sorted out. And we're done, or at least one is, and I just do not have time to finish the second headrest, but I've got one on there, and that is looking really good. So let's go and fit them in the car and just see how they look. Oh, how good does that look? Now, this is just sitting in here. I've got the milk crate sitting behind it. I haven't bolted it together. It's just sitting in place, but that is really starting to get the effect of what the interior is going to look like. And I am very, very happy with the result. It's been a lot of work. I've only got the one headrest done. I haven't done the other one. Yeah, there's still a lot of work with the steamer and or heat gun, whichever I use, or both, to try and sort of get rid of some of these wrinkles and just pull it a little bit smoother. But the overall effect, I'm very happy with my first go at sort of fully custom making seats. I think, yeah, I think they've turned out really good. All right, yeah, that took so much longer than I really wanted it to. I spent probably double the time this week as what I would normally get on a video, and I've got a couple of hours now to get this edited and posted up tonight. So I'm really yeah, pushing myself to try and get it done, and there's still more to do next week. I'll get in with the heat gun and the steamer, as I said, and get that all tidied up, but we're out of time, so I guess that means it's time for fun facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, the last couple of weeks we've talked about the Ferrari Enzo, but their story would not be complete without talking about Ferrari's sister brand, Maserati. In 2004, Maserati wanted to develop a car to compete in the FIA GT Championship, which was required to be based on a road-going version for homologation. Maserati used the Ferrari Enzo chassis and the driveline to build the MC12. Starting with 25 cars, the MC12 was taller, wider and longer than the Enzo, but actually had a lower drag coefficient. Externally, the MC12 had a full carbon fibre body designed by a Giorgetto Giugiaro. And the only part actually shared with the Enzo was the windscreen. The MC12 signalled Maserati's return to racing after 37 years, and it did not disappoint, beating out Ferrari and winning the 2005 and 2007 FIA GT championships, amongst other races. A total of 50 road cars were produced and 12 race cars, bringing the total to 62 cars in total, making it much rarer than the Enzo on which it was based.
All right, and I am quite happy with how those seats have come out. It's so much work getting the everything together, and it's taken so much longer. I'm going to try and do the headrest off camera over the next few days just to sort of get that side of it sorted, and next week we'll hopefully bolt them in and sort of have them so they all fit in the car and they go beautifully, and we can move on to something else, because as much as I enjoy the sewing, I sort of miss this smelly, musty old garage.
Yeah, it does. How long's the sewing taken you? It's been about 2 weeks total?
2 or 3 weeks, yeah. I like you guys.
That's
yeah.
Full time, all day long, quite.
Yeah, 3 weeks, yeah. 3 episodes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been a slog.
It's like all of these things, it takes time, and I can taste the conclusion. I have found out that my diff is not getting back until probably the end of the month. Fingers crossed it gets back then, because I need the diff, as I've mentioned before, so that I can actually get the diff in the car, so I can get the car on its wheels, so I can connect up the dry sump tank, so I can actually start it. So there's all these things that have to happen to get to that point, and we're getting closer. So fingers crossed.
It's all part of the puzzle, isn't it?
That's it. So hopefully you guys will join us for that.
Well, like, subscribe, you know the drill. Let Jeff know what you think.
Yes.
He's been enjoying the comments about its trimming prowess.
Yeah.
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 Woo! Kudos.
Yes,
That's it. Take care and goodbye.
Oh,
And he's going to take this call. Bye.
bye guys.
The last couple of weeks we've talked about the Enzo Ferrari, but
The Ferrari Enzo.
hey guys, the last couple of weeks we've talked about the Enzo Ferrari.
Ferrari Enzo.
It's longer, wider and taller than the Enzo. The body designed by Giugiaro Giugiaro. Giorgetto Giugiaro. Designed by Giugiaro Giugetto. Giorgetto Giugiaro. God. Okay.